Welcome to the Author Corner, our chance to meet the authors you'll want to read. I'm Stephanie, and I'm so delighted to be joined by author Eric Friedman. Eric is the author of It's Strictly Personal, and It's Still Strictly Personal, his journey through his life and the movies. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
I love that. Was that the journey through your life in the movies?
That's perfect. I couldn't have said it better. I couldn't have said it better myself.
That's exactly it. You love the movies, and rather than just top 10 of this and top 10 of that, I love this because it really is strictly personal.
It is. It's a journey.
It is a journey. So tell me, how did you get started? I mean, there's your love of the movies. We're going to go back to that before we even get to why write the book.
Right.
So when did you first have that spark?
I think I had the spark. I was probably reading a book by an author by one of those lists you were talking about.
Yes, the lists.
And I'm reading, and it's interesting reading. It's intriguing reading, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm not getting any kind of a sense of what these movies actually meant to the author. Okay, granted, he's a professional film journalist and he's doing his job writing this book, but I would really love to know what it meant to him personally or her personally. Yeah. And I think it was Maya Angelou who said, if the book hasn't been written, you have to write it.
I love that
I'm paraphrasing.
No, I love the quote. I use it
so
all the time.
I started thinking to myself, okay, I've always had a passion for the movies of my childhood, the late 70s, the early 80s. I'd already been a film critic for my college newspaper. I was already writing a film blog, and in many of my blog posts, I start to get personal about what the movies meant to me.
That.
I only really scratched the surface.
Right.
So I started thinking, take this to the next step. Start writing it down. Recall. I have an unnaturally detailed memory of my life all the way back to the age of 3.
Sure, your wife loves
okay? So, I always had these deep-rooted memories of who I was, where I was, what certain films meant to me as a child.
You never forgot.
I never forgot them, but I never wrote them down. So I just started... I started making a list of all the movies that meant something to me, and then I started extracting, okay, get rid of the ones that are just good movies.
Right, not just...
And when you're a child, so many movies are good movies. I mean, you love all kinds of things that you may not love later when you get to be older, but there was always, in my mind, in my memory, there was always a story behind some of the more meaningful films that I saw as a child and growing up. And they weren't necessarily the best movies or the most popular movies, but they meant something personal to me. And that's what was important. And as I started to write this, I realized something about myself that I don't think I'd ever acknowledged before. And it may actually sound very bizarre, but I think I've always felt through the movies. I think I've always expressed my emotions through the movies. And, that either makes me some kind of bizarre antisocial nutcase, or it makes me
Those directors are thrilled to hear this, by the way.
Or it just makes me someone of true passion. And I like that line on the poster for Flashdance, take your passion and make it happen. And that's what I did.
Do you use movies, aside from the books, on a personal level? If you were getting to know someone, met a person at a bar, would you find that that's what's your favorite movie? Is that one of your leading lines to get to know someone? Is that like your first date? Let's see if we.
I don't know if it's that early, but it's definitely in there. But I mean, listen, before I met my wife, when I was dating, living in Manhattan, in that whole scene, I used to actually put my dates through this test.
Oh God, I want to hear this.
And the test was they had to watch Casablanca with me. And if they loved it, they were worthy of getting to know further. If they couldn't deal with it, if they didn't have the patience, they were gone.
Really?
And
the Casablanca test.
And thankfully, my wife, she loved it. And she passed the test.
The Casablanca test.
She passed the Casablanca test,
Oh
right?
my gosh.
Yeah.
You know, I could see it. I could totally, you know, like you said, if you expressed your emotions through the movies, then you almost want to get to know people on that movie level.
Right, but I mean, throughout history, it's always been said, movies are escapism, and they are, of course. But I mean, in my case, I think I took the escapism to the next level. There was my parents who had a very bitter divorce, and I suppose if there was any positive side to that, on a more, we'll almost say practical level, is that when you're a child and you're seeing your father every weekend,
Right.
you're going to the movies
going to
a
the
little more.
movies.
You're going to the movies a little more often.
I was a child of divorce too. I saw a lot of movies.
Right. So I mean, these events meant something to me.
Yeah, yeah.
And when they I think it was 1977. I was 10 years old. My parents had gotten back together, and we moved to North Shore Towers,
Okay.
which happens to be practically
right.
right next door. And they have a movie theater.
Yeah, yeah, downstairs.
Back then it was private.
Oh.
But for a 10-year-old kid who loves the movies, oh my God, I'm going to be living
In a movie
in a
theater.
complex with a movie theater. I mean, this was just mother's milk taken to the maximum. And I mean, I had some wonderful childhood experiences down there. You know, why? Who knows? In the end, it's just another movie theater, but at the same time, it was part of home.
When you're young.
When you're a child, I mean, the idea that you are getting in the elevator, going downstairs to the movies, and going right back home again, and
your own
your
building.
friends are there too.
Right,
and you,
right.
I mean, this was just it was
Heaven.
the equivalent of perhaps being able to afford your own private movie theater in your home.
And everybody has that now.
It seems they do.
I mean,
But for
I
a
don't.
10-year-old kid in the late 70s, this was just magic.
Wow. So what was that first movie that ever made you like,
Okay, so not necessarily the first movie I ever saw, but for me, the turning point when I realized
the power?
that movies were not, that they could be a real life-changing event,
Yeah.
it was the 1976 version of King Kong.
Ooh, okay.
Now, I was already a kid who
Yeah,
knew of the Great Ape on television, the
Right,
black and
right.
white movie, but now here was this brand new
Yeah.
color extravaganza, and it was, I believe, that it was the first PG film I ever saw on screen.
Ooh.
Prior to that, it was Disney re-releases and the animated films and these wilderness movies that were very popular in the 70s. My dad loved to take us to those. They were all G-rated. They were all very innocent,
Right,
you know, movies about little puppies and whatnot. So this was the first time I got to experience
PG.
something on a cinematic event level, a little blood, a little violence, and I was just thrown for the biggest sloop a 9-year-old kid could ever imagine. And so, I mean, that was, most people my age will probably tell you that it was Star Wars that did that to them. And believe me, it did
And,
that to me
yeah,
too.
Star Wars was
but
amazing.
that was months later.
Right, right.
So somewhere in between Jaws and
I was going
Star
to say,
Wars.
wasn't Jaws that same time
My
period
parents would not let me see Jaws.
Oh, see.
I was probably the only 8-year-old kid in the entire 3rd grade who hadn't seen this movie. And if ever an 8-year-old kid felt left out of a worldwide phenomenon, it was me.
too? Well, as a person who saw Jaws
Yeah.
and couldn't like go in the water for years,
Right.
I think you were spared.
I grew up on the beach. I think I would have survived it.
Oh, I wouldn't even get into the shower after Jaws.
No, that's psycho.
I was terrified of a bathtub after
Oh.
Jaws. So, yeah, so for you it was King Kong. I
For
remember
that,
Jaws.
that was the life-changing for a 9-year-old child.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
But you're right. That same time period was King Kong, Jaws, Star Wars. That was when
That
they
was
exploded.
right. And I never let go of the passion. I mean, even before I wrote down a word, I have a small, collection of items, from that time period. Whether it's novelizations or trading cards,
Right, right.
the origin was always there, in my mind, in my collector's items, on the wall, whatever. So it was inevitable that I write these books.
Wow.
And the idea that I could start from the point where I was 8 years old and actually recall all this stuff.
Yeah. So this first one, it's strictly personal, starts right there in those
1975.
1975, all of those movies that were coming out, those biggies.
Well, the ones that I was allowed to see.
Right.
And
Jaws.
right, in 1975, an 8-year-old kid, any responsible parent is not taking him to see Dog Day Afternoon and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So you got to remember, I'm still an 8-year-old child.
Right.
And my options are limited.
Yes.
And again, mentioning Jaws, I wasn't allowed to see it.
Wow.
I discussed it as part of 1975 because that's when it was released. I didn't get to see that blockbuster film until 79 when it was on television.
Wow.
So my first exposure was edited for television,
Small
cut,
screen.
edited, yeah.
And we didn't have the big screens then. So
We
it
didn't
was
have the
small
big
screen.
screens.
Yeah.
The ABC Sunday night movie finally exposed me to the Great White Shark.
That's right, the ABC Sunday night movie.
I grew up with that.
Oh
I very
gosh.
fondly have a lot of memories of those broadcasts.
You know, the things that 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds today don't get. You know, that's one of the things that now that we have all this streaming and movie, you know, it's not an event. It used to be that everyone sat down to watch that.
It's too easy for them.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, you'd have to hope that the studio would re-release the film again so you could see it again. And then after that, you had to hope your parents would be willing to pay for HBO, which my parents did not.
I didn't have either.
And after that, you waited in vain, usually 3 years after its release, for the film to be aired on television. And that's when you'd get to see it again. But today, I mean, forget it. You can watch it at home for a few dollars without even going to the theater when it's brand new. Right. It's too easy for today's generation.
Yeah.
There's no level of patience that has to be maintained.
Right.
You can have it immediately. You can have it as many times as you want. And I wish I'd had that as a kid.
Yes, but you know, there's something to be said for, I remember The Wizard of Oz. It aired every year around Easter time.
Once a year on CBS.
Once a year, and you'd all sit down. But
That's
even,
what we did.
You know, we'd all sit down and watch The Wizard of Oz, and I'd hide behind the sofa because I was terrified of the Wicked Witch.
Right.
She was on screen for, 17 minutes, and I was terrified of her, absolutely terrified. But they were those annual events.
Yeah.
And your friends in their house were doing the exact same thing.
Absolutely. One of the strongest memories I have also that I write about in the book, growing up on Long Island, but this was also for Long Island, New York City, New Jersey, every Thanksgiving Day, actually both days, Thursdays and Fridays, on WOR TV Channel 9, the classic black and white monster films. So Thursday, Thanksgiving Day, was always Ape Day. And I honestly, the turkey was secondary. I looked forward to Thanksgiving Day so I could watch King Kong.
Wow.
And the next day were those cheap rubber suit Godzilla movies. But I kid you not, to this very day, even today, every Thanksgiving Thursday, I must watch my Blu-ray of King Kong. It's just a viewing tradition that only belongs to me.
Right.
Nobody else gets it. Nobody else is of my generation in my household who would get it.
Right.
But that movie is Thanksgiving for me. In as much as anybody might watch It's a Wonderful Life on Christmas Eve or Halloween on Halloween. I mean, I'm a sucker.
Yeah.
For
events.
I was going to say movie holidays.
Yes.
I'm a sucker for those things. Each one has it. I watch Jaws every 4th of July and many times more throughout the summer, but it has to be viewed on July 4th because I'm just that weird.
No, but that's what's so charming about your books. It's strictly personal, and it's still strictly personal, is that it's really a snapshot of what life, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, you know,
it's a small slice,
you might say you're the only weirdo, but no. I was watching certain things on certain days. That's, a Charlie Brown Thanksgiving.
Absolutely.
Only aired once a year.
I have to watch that on my
Grinch,
DVD. The Charlie Brown Thanksgiving, the Christmas, Easter, Halloween.
There are certain things, and a lot of that gets lost now because, like you said, availability.
It's too easy.
You can just do it whenever you want, and because of that, it's not the grand event. But then again, I mean, we're talking movies here, but Saturday morning cartoons. You woke up on Saturday morning.
The only time in my life I ever welcomed getting up at 6 a.m.
Right, because you only had this little window. The cartoons were going to air, and then they were going to stop.
One Thanksgiving, I think it was a few years ago, one Thanksgiving holiday weekend, I decided to just relive that small part of my childhood. And asked my family, I treasure sleeping late, but on this particular holiday, I went out, I bought a box of Apple Jacks, and I committed myself to waking up at about 6 a.m. and watching my Looney Tunes DVDs.
Love that.
And
Did your teeth just curl with all that sugar?
Listen, my parents wouldn't let me eat that sugar when I was a kid, so I was very long overdue for that sugar.
That's funny.
And my son was younger back then, so eventually he comes into the living room, joins me, and we're munching on cereal, enjoying Bugs Bunny, and it is, as you say, a snapshot.
It is a snapshot.
And maybe that's what life is. Yeah. Just an ongoing series of moments and snapshots. And I'm not a historian. I don't claim to be a film historian or a professional film journalist. I don't pretend to be those things, but I've also always been very intrigued by film and its relationship to pop culture and how we are affected by movies.
Right.
I was there, and maybe you'll remember too. I was there. I was only 11 years old, but I was there when disco re-exploded after Saturday Night Fever.
Yep.
And okay, I'm a kid. I couldn't go to clubs. I couldn't see it firsthand, but I got a taste of it that was the first R-rated movie I ever went to.
Really?
And my mother almost made us leave the theater because the profanity is very raw, still is.
Yeah.
But I got a small appreciation for what it must be like out there in the world, embracing the music and the culture of disco and dance. And that's, I write about that film in the first book, and I really go beyond what a popular film it was.
Right.
For me, that film, Saturday Night Fever, that's one of the strongest socially relevant films ever made, in my opinion. Okay, I'll give you an example. Again, I don't know how well you remember the film. There's this is Brooklyn. This is Bay Ridge, Brooklyn.
Sure.
It's a melting pot of different cultures and ethnic backgrounds. The Italians, the Puerto Ricans, the African Americans. And with that melting pot also, unfortunately, comes a lot of friction, a lot of hate, a lot of racism. But there is this one pivotal scene in the disco during the Bee Gees' Night Fever when for just a few minutes, for the duration of one song, all of these cultures put aside their differences and their conflicts with each other. They put it aside and they all get together for the duration of one dance, which is the electric slide.
Yep.
And for those moments, nothing matters but this perfectly coordinated and choreographed dance of the people of Brooklyn. And it may not be something you recognize at first. At first, it's just a dance scene in a dance movie. And this is not coming from somebody who particularly likes musicals. Saturday Night Fever is not a musical, in my opinion. But I mean, for me, socially, it really says something.
Yes.
And the unfortunate side of it is that when the record is over and the dance is over, everybody's back to being their imperfect self in a world of mixed cultures. But that one scene is very powerful. Wow. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who has seen this.
I'm sure you're not.
I'm sure I'm not the only one who notices this.
But what a great thing to write about, too. I said to you, I love the juxtaposition of not just your life. It's called It's Strictly Personal, but really, it's all of our lives, we who grew up in that era.
If the movie, it's all of our lives if you embrace the movies. Some people don't embrace the movies. Okay, they go to the movies, they see it, it's over until the next one.
Right.
So, but
it's still a picture of the 70s.
It is. I mean,
the 80s, whatever decade you're in at that moment.
These books are a love letter, not just to myself and my life, but to really to everyone of my Generation X, who was there.
Right.
I mean, we were there when the summer blockbuster first became, something.
Something.
Prior to Jaws, there were no summer blockbusters. No. It did not exist in the industry.
Right.
So we were there for a collection of awesome films. And that doesn't make us special. Every generation is going to say that. My son is going to say, I was there, during the Marvel and DC craze.
Right.
I saw some of the most incredible films. And he's right. He should embrace that. That's his generation.
Right. But this is,
it's my love letter.
It is.
To what matters to me.
And I love that you wrote these, and it's a love letter, and it is a gift to you. But also, what a gift to everyone of that generation who wants to relive, to revisit, to say, wow, I saw that movie. I don't remember that scene.
Right.
You're right.
I mean, if nothing else, it would be wonderful if those who read my book might decide, hey, let me go give this another look.
Right.
And maybe walk away with a different perspective than they might have originally had.
Exactly.
And, this isn't just a child. This is a child that eventually becomes a boy who becomes a teenager, a young man,
right.
a grown man. And life is not kind. Life does not cooperate. There's trials and tribulations. And not just my parents' divorce, but I mean, friends, school, falling in love for the first time.
Right.
I mean, I had a movie for all of it, or more than one.
Right.
So the first book, it's strictly personal, is 1975 through 82. Okay. So I'm starting out as an 8-year-old boy, and I'm finishing off as a 15-year-old who's just barely getting into his high school years and trying to figure out where I belong in the world. Right. And I use movies.
What a memory you have.
Yeah, I told you, unnaturally detailed.
Oh my gosh, that's why I'm saying you're writing about in detail, not just, what you did, but recalling the feelings. Because sometimes we can remember, I was at that place, but you're recalling the feelings, which is a lot.
Because I always had them. I just finally decided to extract them and put them on paper.
Right. And then it's still strictly personal, 1982 to...
83 to 91.
91, okay.
So we're covering my high school years in the 80s and just getting into the early 90s when I'm still in college.
Right.
So now we're not only into the 80s blockbusters like Ghostbusters and Back to the Future and Top Gun and Die Hard, but... we're also into the John Hughes period.
Okay.
And we're talking about, so now I'm in high school in the 80s, and I'm being raised by 3 people. My mother, my father, and John Hughes. I am learning about myself through the Breakfast Club.
Oh, yes.
Through St. Elmo's Fire.
Oh, yes.
Through the Brat Pack,
as
they were referred to. And one of the most intriguing things I found about some of the movies I've just mentioned, and again, this is not my unique perspective. I'm sure other people have thought of this also, But many of these films, you couldn't make The Breakfast Club today.
No, there's a lot, like you said.
I mean, first of all, there is so much, there's plenty of sexism and politically incorrect issues taking place, not only in The Breakfast Club, but in 16 Candles. But you want to know something? In all likelihood, if you tried to make The Breakfast Club today, these kids in detention probably wouldn't even be talking to each other.
Right.
They'd be off in their own corner with their phones.
Right.
And if you were lucky, maybe they'd text each other. But that's not a movie.
No, exactly. No, you're right.
So you've really captured, John Hughes has really captured a period here that will probably never exist again. And again, I was there.
You were there.
I was there, and I tried to make an attempt to understand who I was, who I could be through the movies. St. Elmo's Fire came out in the summer of 1985, and I had just graduated high school. I was college bound. And I'm looking at this film, and I'm thinking, wow, I mean, I'm almost wondering if I can use this as a playbook for what might come.
Right, right.
Is my college roommate going to be my best friend? One of the way I specifically write about St. Elmo's Fire is that it's a film where, in my mind, there is fantasy versus reality. The fantasy, will my roommate be my best friend? The fantasy, am I going to meet the woman that I'm going to fall in love with and marry? Okay, the reality, my first college roommate was a total jerk. The reality, I did not meet anybody who came close to being the woman I'd spend my life with. The reality, God, I had a crush on my RA who didn't return that. I mean, I was like a pathetic scene out of Summer of 42.
Right,
you know?
right.
Just this adolescent crush on this slightly older woman, but again, until I learned the reality of life, I was living the fantasy of life in my head through a movie like St. Elmo's Fire. So, I mean, you couldn't have timed it better to be there at the right place
and
at the
you were
right
at the right place at the right time
for these movies.
But so is an entire generation of people, and your books appeal to that generation of people. My generation, like you said, Generation X, but also people who want to look back and remember and say, "Are you sure it was like that, Dad?"
You're right.
You know, it's so nice to have that, real.
But again, and one of the other things is that, okay, this is a chronological saga.
Right.
So I'm getting older. I'm getting supposedly more mature, supposedly wiser.
Right, right.
But with that, I'm opening up my mind a little bit to the possibilities of cinema.
Yeah.
I'm going beyond the blockbuster. I'm going beyond the Terminator.
Oh, so
we're
going to see you grow up through these books too.
Well, I mean, by the time you get to this book, and I'm, in my early years of college,
right.
I'm discovering filmmakers like David Lynch.
Right.
I'm discovering a wonderful film I saw by the late David Lean called A Passage to India. I'm discovering finally foreign cinema.
Well, we're going to have to hear about that next time, because you want to take your journey through the movies. Please join Eric Friedman. It's strictly personal. It's still strictly personal. And there's more.
There's the third book to complete this trilogy. It's called It's Forever Strictly Personal. And that'll be coming out hopefully by the end of the year or early next year.
Sounds great. Thank you for our journey.
Thank
you. And join us in the movies.
We're just books up on a shelf. Try to understand this if you can.